Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most homegrown work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are back to talk about Shaking Hands 9.12, Shaking Hands 9.Z, and our extra material, which is Diagnosing Magical Items, or Magic Item Identification is the official term. Anyway, let's get into Shaking Hands 9.12. We pick up from Lucy's perspective. We are right back into the action as Bathos and Bridge begin chasing the gang through the apartment building, closing off all of the escapes. A tense action chapter, and one that has a lot of moving parts that is quite fun. One thing I really liked is how impactful the presence of the Innocents felt in this entire fight. Like, one, because having the Innocents around really constrains what some of the characters are able to do magic-wise, especially, the Abyssal Beast. But then also the Innocents, observing Bridge has impacts on what Bridge can do. And then also Bridge can take over Innocence. So there's like three layers of how these Innocents really add layers to this battle, which I think is great. It really works so well.
Yeah, like you're right. We see all of those. Bathos has to run away from them. Bridge initially is in a police officer's body, so that gives him like this almost advantage because of the Innocence.
Yes, and then he can kind of order them around really effectively.
Yeah, like you're right. They're an obstacle that is used in so many different ways in this fight, and that's really cool. I hadn't even really put that together until you said it just now, but I really like that.
Yeah, it adds a lot to the dynamics of the fight, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, from the get go, this chapter is really kicking it up to 11.
Yeah, I mean the chapter throws us right in the deep end. We sort of talked about this last week, but we don't know that much about the Abyss, except everyone says it fucking sucks. And I think somebody once referred to it as like primordial chaos or something. And like I felt chaos in this fight. Like this was so when they're against Bathos at the start, it's so chaotic. Like there's this moment where it's this great paragraph where Lucy's like, my thoughts were pulled in three directions, like, blah, blah, blah. And it was like the third one is the fire escape is falling over and I'm about to fall to my death.
Yeah.
The fact that that's third on the list just kind of shows how like insane and instant impact this whole fight was.
Yeah, God, it's crazy that moment where she almost dies.
Yeah, and she thinks to herself like, "Oh, this is going to annihilate Ronnie and my mum and Booker," and I was like, "Oh, that's so heartwarming and also tragic that as she's falling to her own death, she just worries about what it'll do to
the impact it'll have."
Yeah, to the people who care about her. It's like as heartbreaking as it is badass that that's what she thinks about.
Yeah, and then she is saved by Avery, and we'll get to that in a second. But then she just kind of continues on, and she doesn't even. I mean, I guess they're in dangerous situations all the time, but this is Lucy processing that she's about to die, and then she doesn't, and then she never really. I don't know, like add another mark to the list of traumas that these three have to go through, I guess.
I think we do see it affect her because there are a number of moments throughout the rest of this fight against Bathos where she gets like these moments of she calls it vertigo, but I think it's like yeah, that's sort of her subconscious being like,
what the fuck
just
is
fucking
happening?
died.
Yeah.
But you're right. She doesn't sort of consciously sit down and process it later. But yeah, no, yeah. Can we get back to like Avery just fucking leaping off the third story in a blanket so she can use the black rope? Like,
yeah.
I mean, holy fuck! Just in this fight in general, these two are fucking badasses. Apparently, Verona's been holding them back.
Yeah. It's wild to me that Avery doesn't think that she's a badass in these fights because she's pulled this exact move of like effectively diving out of a window after somebody to save them with a black rope twice now, right? She did it with Clem in Daniel's magical Fey Tower. And it's awesome. And Lucy's awesome. Sorry, Lucy is awesome, but Avery is this move that Avery is pulling is just like so swish.
I mean, to be fair, it's like, it's something we've talked about a lot throughout the story. All three of them do this to some extent where they get in their own heads and they're like, oh, those two are so amazing and I'm just me. And it's just, you're all just idiots. You're all great.
Yeah, you're all very, very, very awesome.
But like these two are very much the physical combatants, and you see that in this chapter. Like, yeah, like just this moment here, I was just like, yeah, holy shit. And again, this is like the first very tiny part of this chapter. Like again, to bring that chaos back up, like we're about to get into the inside part of the fight, and it's just like so messy and like confrontational and full on.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this chapter, definitely. So yeah, the fight starts to look a bit grim as they spill out into the parking lot. But then some innocents come out, and Bathos is kind of forced to retreat a bit. The group kind of regroup, those two and John, before realizing Melissa is still inside, and they probably need to save her. Unfortunately, imagine if they could just walk away and be chill. No. Gotta save Melissa. So
no, she knows too much about them. That's the only reason to save her.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this great moment. She's kind of being interrogated by Bridge, and Bridge is saying, she reveals she doesn't know anything. And Bridge says, "You're not very useful to me, are you? Want to take a walk outside?" Melissa's response is, "There's no fire escape anymore." And Bridge calls her a little slow on the uptake, which I thought was very funny. It's just classic Melissa failing to comprehend the actual weight of situations that she's found herself in, which makes me think, we've been talking about what's she going to turn into. I get the sense she's turning into this like Mr. Magoo type of aware, or like Baby's Day Out, where she'll just kind of wander through incredibly dangerous situations without ever realizing that she's putting herself in danger, walking across the pylon as it gets moved around on the construction site without ever really noticing what's going on effectively.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just Googling Dr. Magoo. Oh, Mr. Magoo. Yeah, I don't know. Like the thing that always jumps out to me from Melissa interactions is she's so difficult to everyone all the time. Like
she keeps accidentally being a center point of this conflict, and every time someone tries to get her involved, it turns out badly for them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
She's just a sandbag.
Well, yeah, that's more the direction I'm currently see her going in. Is she going to develop into just some sort of obstacle of a person? It's just everyone around her finds themselves just hampered by her presence.
Yeah, which is great for her. Great stuff, Melissa.
I mean, yeah, she's literally doing it to herself and won't listen to anyone who tries to change her mind. But yeah, when they go back inside, like to fight Bathos, like it's really fun because we're hearing that stuff that you quoted with Melissa upstairs, and it's almost like we're now fighting this giant, vicious, feral beast in a hallway. It's like like just this insane fight, and the whole time Lucy keeps sort of thinking, "Oh, we got to get out of here to deal with the actual problem, which is Melissa." Like it's a really fun way to sort of escalate the tension after that little respite outside of like we get in there and it's like now we've got to deal with this shit in close quarters combat and try and like this is just the warm up to get to the actual like thing we're here for.
Yeah, this Melissa problem, I mean, it's not resolved by the end of this chapter, right? Like it feels like they really haven't solved it.
Yeah, we'll see where she ends up in Arc 10, I suppose.
I guess
am
it's
just
possible
assuming
that they've solved it, but they've definitely helped Melissa realize the horror of the situation she's in. But I really don't think she's going to stop being a problem.
Yeah, if I agree, I think it's optimistic because the last thing we see from her is at the end of this chapter. Lucy's like, "Go try sleep this off and hope you can forget it happened." And Melissa's like, "Okay," and I was like, "Oh, I don't think we're that lucky."
Yeah, unless we see Alpi like going into her dreams and kind of fudging things a bit, true. I really don't see it happening.
Like, yeah, I think this will maybe just be the stage where she actually starts to listen to them. Hopefully,
thank God.
Took we'll long see. Enough. But yeah, and then again in this hallway, Avery and Lucy fucking rule. They're like jumping around. Lucy does like this weird, almost matador move to stab it. Which like later on sort of is used to help remind us that like this thing's just an animal. And that was when I started to feel a little bit bad for it because it was just like a rabid dog kind of thing, I suppose, which is like you've got to stop it, but also it's just kind of tragic. Like this thing, it's not evil like Bristow or, it's not being a dick like Bridge. It's just following its instincts. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, even the most monstrous monster that we've seen in this entire story, this abyssal beast, is still kind of just a product of instinct and its rules and surroundings, right? You can't help but have a bit of empathy for it.
Yeah. Also, like, so this was like a perfect like Lucy combat chapter because obviously this thing like stains everything around and it's like trying to bring the abyss here or open this up to the abyss. And all I could think was, way back in the student guide, there was that one kid who was labeled an abyss drinker as his practice. And I just got to ask, why are you drinking this?
Maybe this is the abyss drinker kid. Maybe this is what an abyss drinker is. But yeah, no, you're right. No, it's insane. Why would you
I'd rather drink Monty's tea.
Yeah, in terms of terrible things to eat and drink, there's a lot in these 2 chapters, and I think the abyss drinker still wins out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's insane. Who would do that? I love all the Lucy combat stuff in this chapter. Like Lucy's Fey duelist shenanigans are always so much fun to watch, and it's not super successful in this chapter, but it's still just a delight.
Yeah, I was so mad that we got bait and switched with that twice. Like, because we sort of set this up where it's like, oh, Bathos is painting this place in the abyss and it's spreading the stains and it's perfect for Lucy to see. And so she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna like set up my arena. And I was like, fuck yes, we haven't seen this thing since I think the implement ritual. Like she's only used this arena in that one scene in Act 4 with Mel. I think she's used it 3 times, but I was still like, it's been too long. I can't wait to see this. And then, like, yeah, you can imagine how sick it's going to be. Like the 2 of them, like fucking playing a game of Splatoon to paint the space in their colors and stuff.
High stakes Splatoon.
Yeah, very like combat. It's like Splatoon, but much more violent. Like I don't know. That would have just been sick. And then, yeah, we obviously get baited with it the first time, but it was even worse because then the second time it's Avery who fucks it up with her stupid Pokeball things. And I was just like, well, now Avery's dead to me because she took away the arena fight that I wanted.
Dead to you, strong words.
Yeah, no, Avery sucks now.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I mean, deciding to use the arena feels like a big thing for this like sort of more considered Lucy who we've had since like the start of Arc 9, like the one who wants to make sure she's choosing when to do stuff and when to push because like she sees this place being taken over and that's what pushes her to be like, well, maybe I can take the turf back. Like she's not just like at the drop of a hat being like arena time.
Yeah, it's a choice for her to start to try and set it up, and it's interesting that she goes for it and it doesn't really work out. I wonder if that will have any ramifications for her.
Yeah, we'll see. Like she must have used a bunch of power trying to start this up twice and failing.
Yeah, true. I mean, she feels kind of winded by stuff before because she's tapping into herself a bit with the weaponry, and I'm assuming this contributes too. So that kind of tracks to me.
Also, I think Avery is now undead to me because when she throws her first Pokeball, she like leaps over the beast and yells homecoming pitch before throwing it straight down at the beast. And I'm just, she's such a fucking dork. I love it. Like, it's such a badass move to leap over this evil fucking beast and throw a baseball at it that's magically enchanted. And she just tops it off with like this dorky fucking announcing her move business. It's so good.
Yeah. She's a real dweeb, but it's quite fun, isn't it? It's it's classic Avery stuff. Shouting out the names of your moves as you do them is always a win in my book.
It's an anime thing, isn't it?
It's totally anime. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
She needs to watch. Verona can show her more anime so she can get more ideas.
She needs to learn from the anime moves of the Teds.
Yeah, see, that was cool anime, like, transformation.
That was good. The costume changes, now that's good.
I still maintain that's the greatest thing I've seen anyone do with the practice in this story.
Maybe it is. It's the best use of practice that we've seen. Yeah. I'll stand behind that. Yeah. So yeah, the tides of this battle turn a bit when Lucy borrows a gun from John in what is a tense exchange before we realize what she's doing. she installs silencing runes onto the gun so John can start using it without fear of alerting the innocents. So John kind of starts turning the tide of this fight, and Lucy and Avery rush up to rescue Melissa, but Bridge has begun an evacuation of the building, and things prove harder than they had thought as it spills out onto the street.
Yeah. One little thing, I do like how Lucy decides she can't leave John earlier, like until he's got the battle under control. There's that moment where she's like, things have been a bit weird since Alexander was shot, but she can't leave him. And I just love that as a testament to her character, because it's like any connection that's positive that they had has sort of been severed, is my read on things. But it's like, even then, she's not going to leave him behind.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's nice to see that they're moving past their problems, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Alexander said the relationship wouldn't recover, so I don't think they're going to become friends again. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to be wrong, but um, yeah, I don't know. I'm just more reading this as a kind of thing where it's like, even if they're not going to be friends and they won't ever get on that well now, it's like she still knows that he's a good person. She's not going to leave him behind. Like she's not. He doesn't need to be her friend for her to like have his back.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And then the other thing that's sort of going on as they start this evacuation is like Lucy's overhearing a bunch of the composite kids' comments to Bridge, and it's like she has this quick conversation with Avery. Like, we're very unsure exactly where he stands. Like they sort of settle on, and I think they were right that he just kind of is playing both sides. Like he's going to stand in the middle, so he knows when the tides turn, he can just pick the right side. But at the very least, that leaves you kind of unsure of like, when will he see that push? When will that moment happen where we get to see him be like, oh, okay, and like help them or not? It's just a fun layer of like, I just never quite felt comfortable with, understanding where he was at.
Yeah, Composite Kid is interesting, isn't he? He's like, it continues out throughout the entirety of this chapter, and then also there's a brief moment with him and Rook next chapter when you're like, hey, wait, is Composite Kid on that side now? Like, consistently, you can't tell if he's actually going to be on your side. I think you can just trust him to be on whoever's side kind of offers to have him most recently, which is great.
Yeah, or he's gonna pretend to be on your side, but it's like you don't know. Like that's the thing. I was fully in that opinion that he would betray Bridge if he thought Bridge was going to lose, or he'd betray the Kenneteers if he thought they were going to lose. But he's just like, it's like, so you're just waiting for that moment where he decides to become a factor, and it's its own kind of tension. And yeah, then obviously with all the stuff with Crook, I'm just like, oh god, is this kid just Captain Susceptibility? Like,
yeah, 100%.
It reminds me of that episode of Community with the dean and the conspiracy theory ones, or is he just addicted to taking sides?
He just goes on whoever's side. Yeah.
And then so as Lucy's like chasing after Bridge because he's got Melissa, she just has this moment where she's sort of like, it feels wrong karmically that he could just shoot me as an other in this situation. So even though he's like got his gun out, I'm just gonna walk out there. Like that's fucking wild. I mean, she keeps innocence between them because she's not an idiot, but just like, especially for for a black person to just lean on that confidence like that. Yeah, this was a huge moment. I
mean, the iconography of
yeah,
Lucy, the police, and guns has obviously run through this story a fair amount already. So having this beat of her thinking, no, he can't shoot me, it doesn't. It feels like Wildbow's putting that in there to yank the rug out from under us by the end of the chapter, and that doesn't happen, thank fuck. But it really feels like Wildbow's winking at us and being like, get ready, here it comes.
Yeah, because for a moment I was like, yeah, but fuck, can't it though? Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as well as obviously like the metaphor that would tie into stuff like BLM and all that stuff.
Yeah,
there's also the magical side to it. Like Lucy does keep the innocence between them because she's sort of like I do need to help myself a bit. Like she sort of has this the spirits help those who help themselves kind of thought.
Yeah.
Which I suppose makes sense because we've compared the spirits to like the audience of a story before, and so I guess like they'll help you if they think you're doing cool shit, but if you just like rely solely on them for you to be cool, like it's a fast way to fall, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean anytime you rely on like the rules of the practice, it always feels like they can come out from under you at any point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But I suppose, and again, it speaks to the limits of karma to affect you. So does that relate to Charles? I don't know. Yeah, I'm just tinfoiling. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, there's another great moment where Bridge and the composite kid get Melissa in the cop car, but then some gremlins show up to fuck with it. I think Avery puts them in there. So then they have to get Melissa back out, and she like fights them getting out of the car as much as she fought them getting in. And Lucy's just like, God, she's uncooperative every step of the way. And like, obviously, this leans into what we've already talked about, but it's also just like, it's very fun when Melissa is being that like equal opportunity fuckwit. Like I think we've said this in the past about other characters and stuff as well, but it's like when you take a character who's really annoying when they're doing stuff to the protagonist and then just point them at the enemies, it's often very fun to watch them be assholes.
Yeah. Melissa's equal opportunity fuckwittingness, you're right, is great. So yeah, it looks like they're gonna have Bridget on the run, but he manages to pull the old body snatcher trick again, switching out into Melissa this time, desperately trying to escape.
I'm ashamed to say this caught me by surprise. Like as it happened, it was sort of like the police officer turned around and he didn't have the watch on. I was like, fucking yeah, of course he just ran through a crowd and he's a body snatcher. Like it's the oldest trick in the book. It's such a great example of well, either I'm an idiot or I'll choose to say that it's an example of how good Wildbow is at like juggling so many balls at once that like you'll just forget that he threw one in the air right in front of you not that long ago, and then it sort of happens, and you're like, "Oh, shit, yeah, okay."
Yeah. I can't believe he picks Melissa. Like, she's already been so obstinate and clearly is crippled, and then he's like, "Ooh, that sounds like a plan. I'll swap into her." Like, terrible move.
I suppose the logic is
she's still a hostage, I guess. If he's
exactly. Like she's still the leverage that composite kid said she was.
But it's rough. It's terrible.
I mean, okay. Here's another perspective on this. Don't take Melissa's perspective. Don't take Bridget's perspective. Take Melissa's body's perspective, like as a vessel, this body. Bit of a lateral move, I think, going from Melissa to Bridge, right? Like I'm not sure who's worse. Like if you're Melissa's body, who would you rather be in charge?
Yeah. God, I don't know. Just like of all the people to choose, clearly not the right choice.
Yeah, I guess she's not working against him while he's in her as well. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
But yeah. No, you're 100% right. It's like he's sort of trying to hobble away, and it's just like, yeah, sure, you could have picked someone better than this.
Yeah, for sure.
And then actually, so as he tries to get away, there's this great moment where they Bridge can't find a good place to hide because Kennett's shops are all doing so shit. There's not really any that they can get lost in. Like again, that felt super relatable to where I live. The amount of times I've gone downtown here and it's just dead. I love this as a little moment, and again, it's nice to see Lucy in sync with Ken, and like something that comes up a number of times in this section is like the people and the town of Kennet feel like they're behind Lucy, and she actually just really appreciates that because fucking finally, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff. I don't know. I like that it feels like, and Lucy kind of calls out with this Kennet shop thing that she's not sure if it's actually actively Ken, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's fair. But then we see later the bus thing, which does feel like it's actively Ken. I don't know. It just kind of, it's nice. You're right. It's nice.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's nice to see her in sync with the people, and like the people live like because Lucy's whole thing at the start of the story, she had this bar of how she thought people had to act, and it's like people had to prove that they were above that bar before she'd be nice to them, sort of thing. And it this whole scenario here is like a bunch of randoms actually starting to reach that bar.
Yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, they are kind of tracking down Bridge, and they finally manage to trap him with the help of Ken, Liz, and also a sick move from Verona. And yeah, he's bound.
I thought we decided to go with Verona.
That works too. I like how Verona rolls off the tongue, though, I gotta say.
Yo, we spent way too long brainstorming names for the Glam and Verona, just as an FYI.
Verona. It's nice. It rolls. Try saying it. Audience at home, try saying it with me. Ready? Verona. See how nice it feels?
Yeah, but Verona. You know, the weird thing about this argument is I'm the one who came up with the Verona. You're the one who came up with Verona. We're arguing for each other's ideas.
And that's the wholesomeness that comes from these podcasts, Elliot, from doing a podcast with your friend for so many years. Anyway,
but yeah, I do like in this chase scene sort of through the park, Bridge does get this moment to speak, and he sort of says to Lucy, like, I am the embodiment of where trying to talk gets you. I'm a living false accusation. And I like this, again, for just humanizing him. Like, after all the shit we've just gone through, he's, like, taken over people, held guns to other people. Some people have had both of those things happen to them. And you still sort of get this moment that humanizes him a bit, or for want of a better word, I suppose. You know, it gives you sympathy for him. He's obviously being an ass, but like with a line like that, you just sort of like you can see why he just can't bring himself to trust in authority.
Yeah. I mean, fair enough, right?
Yeah, like exactly. Like I'm like you're doing this all wrong, but yeah, like he's a living false accusation. Of course, he's not going to trust the people in charge.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's especially relevant as we touched on, right? Because it's tying back to these themes of justice. Having Lucy be the one that kind of helps bring him in, I think, is very interesting.
Well, especially the way she does it. Like she and Avery go out of their way to be like, please step into the circle. We're going to try to be fair to you and like figure out a way for you to exist that doesn't cause people harm. And he eventually sort of relents, which like feels like a big moment. And just in general, like the whole thing where he's like, he loses any bodies. So he's just that like group of scars and a watch and stuff. And he feels so small and vulnerable. Like, you know, it's like the sort of the big man police officer who was threatening everyone. You know, it's just this small, scared little thing, and that's when they show compassion. It's really good.
It's almost like the real him is actually just this tiny, vulnerable thing, and he wraps himself up in other people to try and disguise that fact. But I'm interested to see what happens to Bridge now, right? Like we've now subdued this hostile other. And we kind of saw a bit of it with McKay, and we see a bit of it with the composite kid. But Bridge is an interesting spot because he's not as like aggressively hostile as the Beast, but he's not as like, but he's hostile enough that we're gonna have to deal with him, right? And I'm interested to see, as a test of Kennet as a system, how this will work, what will happen.
Yeah, 100%. Like that's what so much of this is going to come down. Like, I mean, yeah, this is a story about justice and all that, and these are our first real criminals in Kennet. So what do we? I mean, we've had others where we sort of had to drive out or whatever. Yeah, like the Abyss Beast is a good example. They just, it sounds like at the end of the chapter they yode it back into the Abyss.
Yeah, you can exercise that one, but you can't necessarily do that with Bridge.
Yeah. What do you do with Bridge, McKay? Like, it's such a good test of, Kennet in so many ways. What's Kennet turning into? What are the Kenneteers turning into? Yeah, I can't wait. We'll get to Composite Kid next chapter when he comes up on that regard too. But he's also very interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, like overall, it's sort of like just this moment, these final moments where they bind Bridge, where he just again it reminded me of the Abyss Beast. It's just right at the end, you just can't help but feel a bit sorry for them when they're defeated, and it's just like they were just hurt and afraid, and in understandable ways.
Yeah.
Also, so someone took care of the Abyss Beast's spawn and its nest, right?
I mean, it's not mentioned, but they must have, surely. Someone's out there doing it. Maybe it is mentioned and we missed it.
Yeah, I think that's where all the other Kennet others were.
Mm.
Guess we'll see.
Yeah.
And then Melissa, after being taken over by Bridge, she's like, and obviously, and dealing with the Abyss Beast, she's like, oh, so this is what all the warnings are about. And they're like, yeah. And then she's like, you should have told me. And they're like, telling you gets you in deeper. And she just says bull. And I was just like, fuck, she's just such a.
Yeah, she's just not. I don't know. How much do you have to see Melissa before you fucking accept it?
Oh, it's so good. I can't wait to see her again in Arc 10 because she's going to have to have like taken another step in the direction towards being unaware, surely.
Yeah. I love that when Bridge goes to Clonarona or Verclona, depending on which you prefer. When Bridge goes onto Verclona's wrist and Verona dissolves into dust, laughing in a very Verona way, which I thought was just so funny that this fake Verona, even the fakest of fake Veronas, is still overjoyed with delight when she traps someone like this. It would be such a Verona gleeful cackle. I can imagine it.
Yeah, I mean, Lucy was the perfect person to make a fake Verona because who knows her better. I do love as Lucy's crafting Verclona. She makes it look sad, and then she even talks to it, and it's like, "I hope you're okay." Like it's a touching moment we skipped on before, but she actually sort of makes this thing and is like, she keeps describing it as fragile in a way that's sort of like, okay, are we just talking about the glamour Verona right now, or is this your internal commentary on Verona as a whole?
Good stuff. Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, yeah, I like the fact that you call out the idea of Lucy kind of mentioning it being fragile. You're right. It feels very on the nose. So yeah, Lucy and Avery head back to the apartment block to check up on the Abyssal Beast. John is still handling it.
I love how this actually feels like that part in like a Law and Order episode or whatever. All those shows blur together a bit for me. But like they'll first get on the scene and then the person they want to talk to like always runs away and they sort of chase them, and then when they come back and it's like there's all the forensics and stuff on the scene and it's all being handled. Like this feels like that. Like they're coming back to talk to their chief, Matthew, who's like giving them more details on what they found in the scene while they were off chasing the perp.
Yeah. I feel like whenever we have John in the story, the story feels very Law and Order to me.
Wait, John?
Yeah. You don't think? Not even because of this specific, like he's not in this part of this scene.
Yeah.
But anytime John is in it, his soldier vibes just make it feel very like cop procedural stuff. I don't know.
No, okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. It's just well, I mean,
that's what
he is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's exactly what he is. Yeah,
yeah.
He's this manifestation of a soldier.
Yeah.
No, I see what you mean.
Anyway, so yeah, they get back to the apartment block, and I love there's this moment where they're walking around and they see some innocents, and Lucy flags they're smiling and giggling to themselves, and obviously that's unsettling when you first read it. And then Lucy clicks on what it is, and you, as the audience, click what it is. Oh shit, it's Jabba who is here, who is helping to wrap up this situation. And it's like immediately, oh, these innocents smiling and giggling. What's going? This is so unnerving. Oh, it's Jabba. Okay, cool. It's just like such a fun beat. I love it.
Yeah, I thought it was really great because it's like Lucy doesn't outright say it's Jabba. She just goes, "Oh, right," and it was like that was the same moment it clicked for me. I was like smiling, giggling. Oh yeah, okay, no, that's Jabba. Like it was one of those moments. Like I love that. I think we used to talk about this a lot in Pact as well. But those moments where you're figuring something out at the exact same pace as the character feels really good. Like because sometimes it feels good to beat them to the punch because you get to feel like smarty pants, and sometimes you're behind them and that can be frustrating. But like there's something about being on the exact same rhythm as the character that just really gets you involved. And I had that for a brief moment here with Lucy where it was just like, oh, it's Jabba. And he's continuing to be unnerving as fuck.
Yes. Something else I really liked, as Lucy catches up with Matt and tells him what happened, she does this great double talk. She says, Verona helped us get Bridge, which is, I mean, that's the main one. Even saying Verona helped us get Bridge is such a beautiful little seed of making sure Matthew is off guard. I just thought that was really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Verona possibly tops it next chapter when she describes the scenario to Tashlit. But yeah, there's no way I would be this good at that, especially in this scenario. Like Lucy has just spent an hour fighting monsters, and then she just walks up and sort of casually drops this line.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's great stuff. And then there's this bit where they go in to see how it's going with John and the Abyss Beast. And John's just like, fucking taking it out by himself with some help from the goblins, presumably. Nibble didn't need to do anything. Matthew comes in and says, oh, that's good. And Lucy's read is that he almost sounds disappointed. What is that? Is that... What do you think?
I've seen a lot of discussion around this, like all sorts of people saying, oh, he wanted the Doom to get out and kill the Kenneteers when they tried to stop it because he's an evil villain, like culprit person. Other people are like, oh, he wants to see how well they can go up against it. Like, can they stop it? Like I've seen lots of people talking about stuff like that. But I've decided in this chapter I'm going to double down on my tinfoil that I think I came up with last week. Off the cuff, which was that one that Matthew is actually under Edith's thumb. And so my theory is he wanted to let the Doom out because he was hoping that the Kenneteers would beat it, or he'd be free from some sort of hold Edith has on him when the Doom's not in him. I don't know. I need to go back and read his part of 5.d to make sure I'm not fully misunderstanding his headspace with regards to Edith. But there's just that other moment where he mentions Marissa is still injured from what Daniel did. And she kind of scolds him a bit. She's like, I can hear you, And that just gave me it's Marissa. So, I'm not going to try and pretend to have an insight to her motivations. But you could just sort of read it as him, sneaking in a dig at her because if she's one of the co-conspirators, if he's also under her thumb,
presumably there's some frustration there.
Yeah, just rattling the cage a bit, letting knowledge that she's weak sneak out to the Kenneteers.
Yeah, maybe.
So I don't know. I really need to go and reread that part of the Matthew 5.d to make sure that this theory isn't completely unfounded, but it's growing on me because it's just buck wild.
It is wild, and I quite like it. But in almost every interaction we've had with Matthew and Edith, especially Avery has always come away with, oh, it feels like Matthew is the domineering one in this relationship. And maybe that's just being set up so that it can be flipped, but I don't know.
Oh, yeah, not gonna lie, that is a huge part of why I think it would be cool. It's just because we've spent most of this podcast saying the exact opposite. But the other thing I quickly wanted to point out from this section as well is you mentioned they walk in, they see the beast is defeated, and I like how that's really nailed in because Cherry Pop is basically dancing on top of it, whacking it with a condom.
Yeah.
Which just this is the girl who lost a fight to a cigarette, right? If she's dancing around on you, whacking you with the condom, you're down.
Yeah, you're done. For sure.
It's also bound partially in gobbets of snot, which I don't know if those are exclusively a pecker snot thing, but I'd love to imagine that he helped.
No, it must be. It feels intentionally, referencing pecker snot, right?
Yes, I think so. I don't know. To learn that other goblins can weaponize their snot somewhat wouldn't really surprise me. But that is
that's true.
It feels like it has been established specifically it's his MO. So I'd like to believe he had a part in this.
Yeah. So yeah, the duo regroup after with Verona, and they catch each other up on what has been going on. And yeah, I mean, we were pretty worried about Verona being off by herself, but it sounds like she did pretty well. She hid the furs, shored them up with some runes and magic and stuff, and seems to be pretty confident that will do a good job at keeping them, safe. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, in broad strokes, I love that we've now just moved to things haven't dramatically shifted. We sort of talked about this hopefully being the case last week, but it's now the furs are just hidden in a different location by a different team, but it's still like I can't wait to go back into relations with the Kennet others, and everyone's just going to have to be pretending things are normal, but they're so not. Like, yeah, this is going to be great. It's such a cool way to change up the dynamic in a way that moves the plot forward but doesn't end it. Like, I just always assumed when they found the furs, the shit would hit the fan immediately. But that's not the case, and it's cool.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that the shit hasn't hit the fans quickly. I mean, I don't know. It has in a number of ways, I guess. So maybe that's wrong. We will have to see. I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I just think this is a nice way to change the dynamic of the town in a kind of irreversible way. Like this is going to be much more fun to explore because now like Edith's Edith's clearly going to be a fucking totally different person, I'd bet. And like if she suspects the Kenneteers, that'll be a thing. They have to feign ignorance around people like Marisica.
I mean, feign ignorance without being able to lie, which is a fun kind of reversal of their interrogations theoretically that can get set up.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is going to be, well, yeah, because people will know that the furs are still in town, so it's going to kind of be like the original premise for the murder mystery was the furs are still in town, so we know someone here did it. Now it's going to kind of be like Edith gets to be like, well, the furs are still in town, so somebody here did it.
Yeah.
And like we obviously set up Crook as a big player in Arc 10. Next chapter, I wonder if Edith's going to suspect her.
Interesting.
This will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that will be fun. We'll see. There's this fun beat where Lucy asks if Verona wants a hug, and Verona says wrong mood for a hug, which is great setup for what happens at the end of this chapter.
Yeah, well, because Lucy thinks on that line again when Verona hugs Jazz in a bit, and it's sort of like, I don't know. I hope Lucy didn't take it personally because I think
I'm sure she understands the difference between a friend and a parental figure, which Verona hasn't had for at least a few years.
Yeah, exactly. What Verona needed was a parent hug, and yeah, exactly.
So yeah, the trio returns to Lucy's house to find Jazz and Avery's parents are there. Verona finally admits that she needs help.
Yeah, and like again, it's one of those things we just had this whole fight against monsters and shit, and this was still the part of the chapter where I was like, oh god, now things are getting intense. Especially there's like moments when they're still outside before they actually go in, where Verona very briefly tries to actually write it off. She's like, "Oh, it was just a dumb argument about chores," and that's when Lucy and Avery are like, "Yeah, we talked about errands."
Yeah, exactly. It's
yeah.
I don't think anyone, even Verona, believes that for a moment.
No. But I think it's so hard not to fall back into patterns like this.
Yeah.
Like that's what this universe is essentially based on. It's like, let's make those patterns magical, but like that is a real thing. Like when you take that bit of space, you can just start to be like, well, it's too hard to go in another direction, so I'm just gonna stay here. And I'm so glad Verona has these people who can tell that idea to go fuck off.
Yep, rightfully so. Yeah, it's powerful stuff, right? As soon as we get into it, it's like I don't know. I mean, we had it as our discussion question 2 weeks ago, and the vibe of there isn't a good solution to this hung like a specter over this entire conversation, over this entire scene, and we kind of get into that when Verona comes back to talk to to Lucy and Avery. But yeah, it's just such an interesting release of this tension that we've been holding over Verona's situation since stuff popped off for that a few chapters ago. Yeah, great moments.
Yeah, no, you're right. It did lead in from the discussion question in a pretty perfect way. I just, the delivery of this moment in the text, I think, is what sells it so well. Like, Jazz plays this so perfectly. Like, she's pushy, but not overly so. Like she doesn't press Verona, but she also doesn't let her avoid the topic. She's like, we have to talk about this. She checks whether she wants everyone else to leave. Like, do you need space? Like, yeah, I guess my TLDR is Jazz fucking rules, I suppose. But yeah, like it's the little details. Like Lucy's narration keeps noticing how Verona's fidgeting with her pockets, and it's like you can start to feel the energy just building until it all releases.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to Avery's parents for actually showing up. because they don't have the best history of doing that,
Mm,
especially in the context of Avery. So I'm going to choose to read this as like they know they dropped the ball for Avery, and in their attempts to not let that happen again, they're also supporting her friends.
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
100%.
like to me, this is more evidence of them actually being there for Avery now that they'll also be there for Verona.
Yeah, and it's in a very wholesome and non-invasive, demanding way. It's we are here to
Yeah.
support. Let us help support you. What do you need? Kind of vibe, which is great stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it gives me hope that, like, obviously Avery's had a shaky relationship with them even ever since they've tried to step up. And it's like, hopefully, moments like this, like if they continue to step up, it's exactly what we talked about in Can We Talk About the Girls with Avery's dad. It's sort of like if they're trying to improve and they actually keep doing that, like hopefully, then you can find the path to forgiveness and like letting it be in the past.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it goes interesting. Verona and Avery leave the room. Verona has a chat with the parents, and then Verona comes in and fills in the details. And Verona and Lucy kind of get a bit at each other's throats, as Lucy wants Verona to prioritize herself, whereas Verona wants to prioritize Kenneth and the practice. Um, and it's tense, but tense in a way that they are arguing from different points, but both clearly still in a way that is very respectful and loving of each other, which I thought just always great.
And listening, like that's the
Listening,
thing that
exactly. Yeah.
these three 13-year-olds do better than most people in the real world is like argue in a way that is actually taking on the other person's points and like listening to them.
Yeah.
um I do want to quickly shout out before we get any further into that though, is like part of the reason they have to do this is because Lucy took off her earring so she couldn't eavesdrop.
Yeah.
And Verona is surprised by that. And I'm not going to lie, like if I was Lucy, I don't know that I would have been able to do that. Like I know it's the right thing to do, but like I don't know. I'm very Snoopy, and I have a lot of FOMO. There's almost no way I wouldn't have just had to keep it on to hear and try to understand Verona.
Mm.
So hats off to Lucy. You continue to be a better person than I am.
I think Verona is surprised in part because I don't think Verona would make that decision, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Um,
I suppose Verona's always been the Kenneteer I relate to the most, so that tracks.
so it tracks. Yeah. But yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we talked about in our discussion question, there are no good answers to this, right? Verona calls it out,
Yeah.
actually. There's a quote where she says, "There's no answer here where I can move in with you, Lucy. That's a whole process." And I mean, like, I'm sure we've all kind of been hoping that that's where this story can eventually get to. And it's nice for Wabo to just say, no, that's not really how the world works.
Yeah, it would be nice. And there's definitely a temptation to magic away that as not an
Yes.
option to be
Yes.
like as I was reading this, part of me was just like, I know that this isn't how it works, but like, if I could just be nice to like do some magic and suddenly Verona lives with Lucy now, and
Mm,
like that's worth whatever the price is. I'm sure it would be big or whatever, but Zed got those $10,000 Game Pass things or whatever. So, yeah. But
mm,
I think what's really fun about this proposed solution of spending time with her mum, um, is how it puts Verona's like civilian and practitionery life at complete odds. Like it's just so perfect in the way that it's like for Verona as a person and as a human being, we need her to go away for these 2 to 3 weeks and actually talk to her mum and make a plan of how to move forward.
mm,
But then also from, like, the magical side of the story perspective, it's like, you can't just fucking leave for 3 weeks. You just hid the furs somewhere, like, I don't know how far away this deadline is, but that's gotta be at least half of the time we have remaining to sort all of this shit out, like, yeah, I mean, it's crazy, and, like,
yeah.
like, like, this is always a classic thing, like, this is, like, the what superhero secret identities exist for, and it's a trope in this genre as well, this idea of, like, you put civilian and fantasy lives in odds, and it's just so effective at, like, putting someone's heart and their head in different places.
Mm, mm, yeah. Yeah. It's,
Like, yeah. I don't know, I find myself flip-flopping. I'm like, "Well, she can't go because there's too much going on here," and then I'm like, "Oh, but she I mean, she has to go."
yeah.
Um Yeah, I had a lot of fun at the end of this chapter, just like flip flopping for hours, being like, she can't go, but she has to. But she
Again,
can't.
we just don't. What could even be what's going to happen next? Who knows? Like, it's so impossible to predict. I don't know. Neither of them is going to happen cleanly. I'll tell you that for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's sort of part of it. Is I'm kind of like, okay, if there's 3 weeks or 2 to 3 weeks where Verona's away, we're gonna have to time skip somewhat, right? Like, because
Mm-hmm.
at the moment this story's had whole arcs that take place in under a week, right? So it's kind of like she's
Yeah.
not gonna be gone for 3 arcs or some shit,
Yeah.
Like, sure, I don't know.
Or
I've
is
said
she?
I've said shit like this about Wild Boar stories before, and I've been proven wrong. So I'm not going to claim that with any high level of confidence. But I'm like, I don't know. I hope we don't time skip the whole thing, because I think it would be fascinating to see what the magical ecosystem of another town looks like. Like, if this is
True.
another small town she goes to, what is the dynamic there? Is there a
We
lord?
could
Are
get
there
like an
others?
interlude
Like,
arc of Verona in,
yeah,
wherever. To name a fictional Canadian town, I guess.
because we've always seen Kennet, which we, by all accounts, is a very odd setup, and the Blue Heron Institute, which is kind of the same thing in the opposite direction. Um, so it'd be nice to go to like something that can stand in for the kind of normal balance of power in a smallish town,
What if
and give us a yeah.
No, I won't go into spoilers here, Elliot, but what if the place where Verona's mum lives or takes Verona for holidays or has this beach house is like small beach house, nice beach house near this small Canadian town of Jacob's Bell, and it suddenly becomes a crossover. Can you imagine? Imagine the hype. Anyway.
Yeah.
I have no idea what
Um,
could happen. That feels as plausible as any of the actual options in the story. So genuinely, who knows?
yeah, I mean, like, the other side of this, as well as seeing somewhere else and what it looks like in terms of the practice, is just like uh, uh, seeing what Verona's mum is going to do here, because she's just so consistently being a useless piece of shit in this story, and it's like,
Yeah, just like
with
such a non entity in Verona's life that it's hard to imagine. She's not just going to show up and be a good force.
yeah, like it sounds like she's listening, and I believe that she's going to show up and like be trying or something, but
Yeah,
like just
yeah,
I
but just not. She doesn't. She. It takes experience. It takes exposure to see
yeah.
and learn. And
Well, I'm
I don't
so
know.
worried she's gonna like fail to be good with any kind of consistency. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, this whole thing, Verona's like, oh yeah, usually when we go away for this time of year, like, I spend my week with my mom, and she takes me to a beach town and drinks with other middle-aged women. So it's like,
Yeah.
you have your
Great.
daughter for one fucking week,
Yeah.
and you just dump her on the beach and don't spend time with her. Like, and so like it's like comments like that where I'm like, okay, even if Verona's mom is going to step up here and not be as shit,
Mm.
it just seems too much to expect her to just suddenly be what is needed.
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
yeah. So even if we see an improvement, just like, I guess, prove me wrong. I'd love to be wrong about this, but like, I just can't see her being enough.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. We'll see.
Uh, I suppose the last thing that happens in this argument between Verona and Lucy about this is Verona says, "I'm not accepting any option that means me leaving Kennet. No way, no how." And
Mm-hmm.
Lucy obviously takes a little bit of an issue with Verona making statements like that, which I think is fair. Um, I don't know, like saying something like that in the heat of the moment seems like a recipe for, yeah, I don't
Yeah, I
know.
mean, she's kind of already. I feel like she's already broken it by the very next chapter, right? Like,
Oh,
she's
no, I think she means, like, more permanently, like, after this
sure she
vacation.
means that. She didn't say that,
Oh, I mean, okay.
right? Like,
Alright, Alexander.
she.
Um,
I'm not accepting any option that means leaving Kennet, and she's gone. She goes to a path, the very next chapter that's outside of Kennet, right? Like,
okay, well, yeah, we can argue the semantic.
I'm
I
just
mean,
saying, like, it's a terrible, stupid oath to make.
yeah, I mean, I suppose you're right, but hopefully no one in this room's gonna challenge her on it.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, yeah, like, I think either way, like, this feels like a line that could come back to haunt us,
yeah, for
obviously,
sure.
like, if the salute, like, well, I suppose that would be the thing, right? Is Verona's mom is like, "Actually, I am going to step up, and I will take you, and we will live in Thunder Bay or wherever her mom lives, and you will live in my nice house. And it's like, well, actually, no, Verona can't do that because she made a stupid promise.
Yeah.
Although, again, obviously, Verona's mom, go live in Kennet for your daughter, you fucking idiot.
Yeah, it's such a yeah. Anyway, but yeah, it's set up with who knows what's going to happen, but Jasmine gets the trio to say their goodbyes, which is incredibly heartbreaking.
Yes. So yeah, we've got till tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah,
it sounds like a lot is going to happen in that time.
It does indeed. But that's the end of the first chapter that we are discussing today, 9.12. Let's get into 9.z with Tashlit.
Hard to believe that was just one chapter with the Abyss Beast and all that shit.
I know.
What a wild chapter.
Wild bow. Ugh, packing them dense. So yeah, we start 9.z. We're in this psychedelic hellscape. It's very confusing. It's very abrasive. It's terrible. Until we realize it's just Montague, and actually it's fine. And he's super chill. Tashlit and Verona are here, and they get to just have some nice chit chat.
I do love this as an opening for the chapter because you're so immediately like, "What the fuck?" Yeah, it's insane. Because the interludes will do that thing where they pick one of the banners just without the trio in it, but it's sort of like always the Kenneteer whose issues most relate to what we're going to be discussing. So you see that Verona banner at the top, and you're like, "Oh, okay, like this is going to be." This makes sense. This has been very much like Verona's arc.
Verona focused, yeah, exactly.
It makes sense that we're going to touch with some sort of interlude that deals with what Verona's been going on, and then just to go from let's enter Verona-ish headspace to the walls are changing and they're flickering between fire and rot and genitals, and you're just like, oh, okay, this is this is even more wilder than I was prepared.
Yeah, there's a bit in where Tash is kind of struggling to describe it and uses the phrase, for less usual adjectives, genital sufficed, indistinct in gender, but raw, goosebumped, and folded towards the center, framed with coarse hair, which is disgusting. I mean, it's really Wildbow has outdone himself in how terrible that description was.
It's so good. It's awful. Where's the fan art of this, everyone? That's what I want to know. Please keep it away from me when it's done.
Yeah, definitely don't post that fan art to anywhere. Just burn it, I guess. If you need to make it fine, yes, but then burn it. Then other fun stuff that happens in this chapter. When Verona shows up, she is a 10-year-old child. So that's interesting, given the fact that this happens on the same night. Like, this has just happened right after what we just saw, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you absolutely have to read into that. Like, I'm thinking, like, this would be about the age where shit probably started to go bad in her household. So, like, the fact, because I think Monty says later, they all sort of are subconsciously choosing the forms that they take here. It's like, I think the fact that when sort of looking for a good time and to escape, or, Verona is sort of reverting to how she was at 10, because that's, in many ways, that's probably where she stopped believing in humanity, right? Like, yeah. And then she changes back to a 13-year-old like the second somebody else shows up, which is obviously loaded as well.
Yeah, got to stuff that all down. Stuff that all down, Verona. Yeah, I wonder whether she actually has come directly from a nightmare about her parents getting divorced.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I mean, I'd believe it. Something to do with her dad seems just about inevitable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting because subconsciously they've sort of picked these outfits. So it's fascinating to see that Verona, initially picked herself as, 10 years old, and what that means about, is that a statement on the dream she was just in, or, her generalized face? I mean, she also has the tear tattoo on her face, which at first I was like, oh, because she's sad right now. But that's a thing in like gangs and prisons, right? For like when you've killed someone.
Yeah.
So is that Bristow?
Yeah, I guess.
He's not dead. So
well,
get rid of it.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I don't know. Ugh. it's grim, whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, in general, I usually don't focus on outfits much. I think we've talked about this, but like my eyes tend to glaze over when someone's getting a big physical description, and then I'm always shocked when I'm picturing them wrong. But in this scene, I was just I was so enthralled by everyone's insane outfits and how dressed up everyone was. It's like this great Mad Hatter's tea party on steroids. Um, like yeah, Lucy's in a silk dress. Tashlit goes into great descriptions on like how she's dressed up, and she's just thrilled to be in a human body again, obviously. Um, and then Avery and Snowdrop, I guess, are using this as a bit of a wedding dress rehearsal.
Mm. We'll get to that.
Yeah. Um, actually, oh, but before everyone else shows up, there's this moment where Verona and just Tashlet are talking. It's only the two of them. And Verona sort of has this moment where she says, "Oh, I can visualize you doing chill stuff like that."
Mm.
And Tashlet says, "Yeah, I just tend to work at the vibe." Um, and Verona starts to ask her how she does that before being worried that that's getting too personal, which I think is Verona code for sharing my emotions. Um, so she then, even though Tashlet's saying she doesn't mind getting personal, Verona then just quickly starts asking questions about whether she can help Tashlet. And I was like, "Fuck no, just ask her." Like, I really hope Tashlit finds some time on this vacation to sit Verona down and charades her feelings out of her.
Hopefully. I mean, I'm sure if this thing ends up happening where Tash goes off with Verona on her adventure, maybe they'll have
I
the
think it
chance.
is. Seems like it will.
Yeah, yeah, we will see. Yeah, so the rest of the group kind of arrives and starts catching up. We got Alpy, we got the other Kenneteers, Montague, the whole gang's here.
Yeah, I love that Snowdrop came in. I wasn't fully expecting that.
Mm.
Um, I I love Lucy's entrance because it's like everyone's there but Lucy. So Verona like pulls some bullshit to get her in early, and it's like a very rough landing. Um, and then everyone just sort of laughs and enjoys the joke, and it really sets the tone for this chapter, which is something we'll probably come back to a lot.
Yeah,
But like this has been such a rough latter half of the arc.
yeah.
Like it's been obviously fantastic but emotionally grueling, and this chapter is just delightful and kind of unwinds all that tension. Like there are so many delightful laugh out loud moments that we can't pull them all out. Like otherwise we'd be here all day because we'd basically be reading the whole fucking chapter.
Yeah,
Um,
it's got a lot of good times like that, doesn't it?
yeah, like it's just I think what we really needed after everything from 9.9 to 9.12 um sort of put so much on us, and this chapter's just like, okay, let's relax a bit and enjoy this banter and these genital walls and all the fun stuff.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So yeah, I didn't really click on it, but Alfie was talking about how she needed to basically spend a lot of time with the innocents trying to repair all the damage that was caused by this fight downtown, and it really just made me realize how much Alfie is putting in work to have the innocents not just get totally fucked over by all the shenanigans that are going on around Kennet.
So the problem with Alfie, she suffers from a bit of a like girl who cried wolf situation here because she's always whinging about needing to get her work done.
Yes,
So
indeed.
like I think she's probably right for now, but I'm just saying, you're always going on about that. Like fucking regular Verona's dad, if you ask me. Like, oh, work.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just I think that's just Alpie's vibe. Is she is just a bit of a slave to the system she's in and her work.
Mm. Yeah, she 100% is. She needs to focus on herself, not burn out, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Um, especially continue to get the vibe that she's very much somebody who's being what's the word I want? She's being lured in by what Crooked Rook is going to be saying would be my guess.
Mm.
Because I still maintain that read I had like from right back in Arc 2 that Alpi is a bit of a centrist and
Mm.
she's going to sort of get suckered in by an extremist who tells her what she wants to hear.
Yeah, no,
We'll
I
see.
think that's probably true. Yeah.
I do also want to call out there's the line right after Alpi sort of says that she needs to get back to all the innocents in her Scottish accent. Tashlit sort of mentally translates it, which is just the first of actually a handful of funny beats where Tashlit is like thinking so much about communication methods. Because obviously here she's like, oh, if only it was that easy to understand Alpi all the time. And it's like, well, like you can talk, or I suppose she can't. That's the whole point. But yeah.
Yeah. So I had this weird beat when I was reading this chapter where I got confused whether Snowdrop was talking inverted or not during this dream. Because, like, there's a few times when Snowdrop is looking at food, like Montague's food, and they're talking about how gross it is, and then Snowdrop says, I'm willing, for the first time, I'm willing to take that gamble or something. And I was like, oh, that sounds like she's just saying that, you know? But then obviously later times she's inverted like normal. I just found it really, I was really struggling to follow it, which I guess is classic Snowdrop.
Yeah. There was one moment that really got me. Like it took me a second to process it. Like there's a bit where Verona's sort of like, well, we're not going to give you a vote because you just vote with whatever Avery says. And Snowdrop responds like, "Nuh-uh." And I sort of just rolled past that the first time, and then I was rereading it like a second later. I was like, wait, no, that's Snowdrop. So she's agreeing. Like,
yeah, that was one that got me too, because she indignantly says "nuh-uh," but what she actually means is, "Yeah, I do, yeah."
Yeah. Like in her head, that probably was just her being like, "Yeah, probably."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
It's amazing how that stuff can still occasionally take a second look for you to be like, no, wait, it's Snowdrop. It means not that.
Yeah.
Also, we should touch on Montague, because he's just as charming and ridiculous as I kind of hoped. I think I had a bit more of a like dweeby nerd vibe from him, but he's like got these like old school like gentleman vibes. Like, you know, he feels like the posh butler or something. And like, yeah, you know, he talks about how this is his way of kind of coping with the utter chaos of his existence, is he sort of has to ironically be the gentleman now. It's a great vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great stuff. This whole thing is great. Like this whole interaction is hilarious. So yeah, the rest of this dream interaction effectively is Tashlit going into her history and her past, which is all pretty horrifying and terrible
and amazing.
I
mean, we could address the fact I think other people made the assumption right back in Arc 6 that when the woman and the sea monster had their consciousnesses flipped, and then it was said that her dad mated with the lady, I think was the exact term. I assumed we meant the divine creature in the human body.
Yes, of course.
This chapter confirms to us that no, actually, her dad has been doing it with like a 200-foot sea serpent.
Yeah.
Which just like,
you know, you do you, man.
Respect. Like, I mean, because, you know, they said he tried 3 times to prove his love and he got 2 children out of it. Like, that's, I mean, just from a biological perspective, figuring that out so quick is pretty impressive.
Yep. I suppose so. Good stuff.
Yeah, I don't know, because this has been a discussion on the Discord since I read the chapter. It's like some people apparently did not make that same assumption I did, but I'm convinced that's the normal thing to do.
No, I think so. I definitely had the same assumption.
Yeah, so very fun moment.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Tashlit, very sad backstory and yet very upbeat personality, and I think that's good as an inspiration for Verona because I don't know, like she needs an inspiration on how to deal with traumatic family situations and just kind of keep going and you know pull yourself into a better headspace.
Yeah, I mean, this is that sort of thing when you first see this as a Verona stuff, and then a Verona related interlude, and then you find out it's Tashlit.
Yeah,
you're sort of like, okay, well, this is what we need to dive into here. Is like how Tashlit copes.
Yeah,
and obviously tying it into her family being a bit of mess is just perfect, of course. It's interesting because I feel like my TLDR of Tashlit's way of processing with these things is to just leave. Like she's like, oh, you know, my sister started being really bitter and she wanted me to be shitty too, and so I just said fuck this and went and visited other people. It's like when the when the bad shit's happening, she just lets it wash over her and leaves.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it sounds like right when she got introduced to this story, she was reaching the end of that being a good solution because she was like, I was sick of wandering. I needed somewhere to settle.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see kind of what next steps are for Tashlit now as well.
Yeah, we'll have to see, I guess. What I really want from this backstory exploration is her half brothers who are dragons.
Yeah.
I'm down for that. Let's see some more of them.
Yeah, dragons with like swimming pools worth of mites on them. So I imagine they're pretty fucking big. Oh no, it was two dragons in one body as well, which
That's
sure.
right. Yeah. God, fuck.
It's just like when Wildbow's writing any part of Tashlit's backstory, what he does is pick the wildest idea he can, and then he has to sit there and stare at it and try to make it at least 6 times as wild as that before he's allowed to continue. Because everything about her backstory just continues to be even more insane than I could have possibly believed.
Yep. Yeah, it's wild, all of this stuff.
But yeah, no, but sorry to jump back a bit. Like it is with all this Tash stuff. Like we do see a number of times in this interlude, she like is super happy to have a human body again in this dream. Like there's so many little moments where she's like, "Oh my god, I have eyebrows and I have nails and they're painted." Like she's
how wholesome.
Yeah, but also tragic because it's like it's just a dream.
True.
She's gonna have to go back. And yeah, like so this all sort of ties into just how she how she sort of copes. And I don't feel like we quite get the full story. At least Verona doesn't here, but it's sort of like the fact that the big takeaway is that she's going to be with Verona to help her through it. And this is Tashlit's MO is it's getting away for a bit to leave the badness behind. Like she seems like the perfect companion to take for something like that.
Yeah, for sure. As soon as that kind of came up as an option, I was like, "Oh shit, that's awesome!" Unless, of course, Tashlit is already aligned against the Kenneteers, in which case it's going to be tragic and horrifying.
I feel like this chapter makes it clear that that's not the case.
You're right. It does. It does. I mean, we see her internal monologue, and it's pretty reassuring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, yeah, I like. I was the same. As soon as this came up, I was like, oh yeah, that's perfect. Like, Tashlit is the perfect candidate, even with all of this chapter's learnings aside about like why she's someone who is hopefully going to be great at helping Verona use this time away to try and process this stuff and find a happy place. It also she's like just far enough away from all of it that it's not like bringing too much of the baggage with you, but her and Verona have gotten on close enough that and well enough that it's like, okay, like yeah, she will be a comforting presence. Like it's just on every vector, she seems like a great choice.
Yeah, a really, really good choice, I think.
Yeah, the only part that would worry me is again, I still don't feel like we quite got in this chapter that sense from Tashlit of like, oh, this is how I learnt to get over it. Like it just seems like she just naturally was just saying, oh, I just left, and it's sort of like, well, you haven't really gone back, and that's like in these 3 weeks, part of your job will hopefully be to prepare Verona to come back, or she has to come back to Kennet in some shape or form. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. We will have to see.
These two and their journey together is going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, it's nice to just have, after the emotionally draining and physically draining stuff that happened in 9/12, it's nice to have the gang palling around and being friends and friendly with each other. Like,
yeah,
it's great that all throughout the story, any conflict between the Kenneteers has felt very justified and feels like they're all acting in each other's best interests the entire time.
Yeah, well, and these conflicts don't really get dragged out or overstay their welcome like the Kenneteers. The amount of times I've thought, oh, this is it. This is going to be a big fight between the three of them. And then they just kind of talk it out maturely. And it's like, oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, it's really nice. Very nice.
But yeah, there's also this other part we should talk about where Monty and Tashlit sort of bring up that, these three are young upstarts or whatever, and they're trying to tackle very old, very ingrained systems.
Yes.
And Lucy, in particular, isn't having any of that. Like they just bring up this thing where it's like, oh, just if you can't change it, don't beat yourself up. And Lucy's like, yeah, but if we can, are people going to come with us? It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. There's a lot of good character beats in this, right? In this section.
Yeah, like there's a great one where Verona is like choking on this horrifying tea that she just drank, and she sort of gestures at Lucy, and then Tashlit translates it for her, which is a great reversal of roles that even Verona chuckles at. Um, I also love the bit where they're talking about like Lucy's like, I hope if you bring Tashlit, it's not just going to distract you, and then they immediately get distracted talking about the TV shows that they could watch together because Tashlit hasn't seen any TV, and Verona's going to vicariously rewatch stuff through her.
We've all
It's
done it. We've all done
yeah.
it. It's a
Oh,
great
I mean, yeah.
strat.
Oh, wait, don't get me wrong, I'm not making fun of that bit. That bit is like, yeah, Tashlit is the perfect friend.
Yeah.
She's like someone you get on great with, and you get to show her all these new shows. But it's just like it's so funny because like the conversation goes, it's like Lucy, I'm worried that you two will distract each other, and Verona's like, no, it'll be fine. We'll do that stuff in amongst like TV and music, and then they immediately distract each other talking about this stuff. Like,
Yeah.
so they prove Lucy's point in
Very
record time.
founded fears from Lucy.
And then it all sort of culminates with Verona's exit from the dream as well, which is just fantastic. She finally gets that gross cake put in her mouth, and then it changes, and she just disappears. Um, like I from again to go back to the writing, I thought that was a really cool moment because it was like earlier on in the thing, they're like, "Well, what harm can happen to us in the dream?" And it's like, "Oh, nothing except you'll probably have to leave, but that'll be really hard to do." So it sort of sets up something has to be really bad for you to leave. And then that's used to close this segment when Verona has this thing in her mouth. She just disappears.
Good stuff. So yeah, this section, the dream chat, wraps up. And the next thing we see is Tashlit has gone to speak to Rook, as well as New Gabe Plus. Rook is her usual mysterious self.
Yeah, although this is the most we see from her, really, in the whole story so far. Like, she's actually talking and sticking around, kind of, for a bit.
Yeah, we get what seems like some relatively normal interactions. She's doing her job. She's doing okay. We heard about Rook being described as not kind of plotting, and it's true that she's like very overtly telling people what she's planning to do, but she's definitely up to stuff. Like, we need to make sure we don't discount her as somebody who's trying to achieve their own goals and is taking actions to make that happen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the description was she's not a schemer,
Mm.
which, like, from memory, this was in 9.1, actually. From memory, like, my read on it was she's not going to be, like, lying to people and, like, as much as anyone can lie in this, but,
Yeah.
like, not, like, tricking people and being deceptive. Like, she's sort of very upfront in, like, how she feels about everything. She's just, even with that, she can still kind of make sure she is in the right part of the chessboard. Like,
Yeah.
she's not moving everyone else's chess pieces against their knowledge.
Mm.
She's just really good at putting herself in the right part of the chessboard.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Having said that, this Rook seems to be pretty close to converting Composite Kid to her side, although, as we mentioned before, that's just kind of his whole deal. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be really interesting to see where he goes with that because he says here he doesn't have much experience with practitioners. So really, a lot of his view on practitioners is coming from other people and the Kenneteers. So it's like, well, the Kenneteers being so good maybe make him not quite believe in the propaganda, you know?
Yeah, maybe.
Also, she's like measuring him up and is clearly planning on like changing him somehow. So I can't wait to see what that's about because she gives the impression that she's doing it under orders from Kennet, as a larger entity. So like, yeah, what is she? What if like Matt and Edith or the council or whatever you want to call it? Like, what have they told her to do to this kid?
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows, right? They talk about. I mean, we know how Rook kind of takes away things, elements that define. She basically manipulates the labels that define these others, right?
Yeah,
and I'm interested to see what that's going to be for Rook, for Composite Kid. Yeah.
Yeah, because we talked about like Bridge being a great test for the town before, but like Composite Kid's an even better one because he's not just like a criminal or whatever. He's also the direct consequences of this town's actions. He's the
Yes.
consequence of them letting the Hungry Choir do its thing here. he's the consequence of the culprits inventing the Hungry Choir.
Yeah.
Like in so many ways, particularly if Edith is a culprit, so if we can kind of assume pretty safely that she had a lot to do with the Hungry Choir being generated, and she is a big part of calling the shots in this town right now. So like, it's very much the people running this town's responsibility that Composite Kid exists. So it's like
Yes.
how they respond to that and what they have seemingly ordered Crooked Rook to do to him is going to be majorly important for sort of understanding how good we should feel about these people, despite all the other bullshit they're up to.
Yeah, we will have to see, I guess. We don't know. But it's nice to find out from this that Rook doesn't seem to be actively plotting against anyone, but is kind of just setting things up so that they're not impacted too negatively. Like it's more defensive moves than offensive moves, seems like.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, well, it sounds more like she sees where things are heading. She sees there's going to be a conflict, and she's just putting herself in the best position she can for that. Which is like, God, maybe she'll be allied with Toadswallow because it's long felt like he's doing the same thing.
Mm.
So maybe those two will get on like grass on fire because I mean, yeah, it's feeling like there's not just going to be two sides to this final conflict, right? It's not just going to be the Kenneteers and their allies versus Edith and her allies. It's going to be fucking those two teams, and then you're gonna have Crooked Rook and her allies doing whatever their fucking bullshit is. Toadswallow is going to be on Team Toadswallow.
Yep.
Yeah, and someone like Team Toadswallow could change hands depending on who Toadswallow thinks is going to be best for him at the time.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, can be a lot of fun.
New Gabe Plus will just be joining whatever team will have him.
Yeah, exactly. Just walk around changing teams. That's the label change. Crook Rook's going to give him the ability to change his labels every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, I just want to say as well with Crooked Rook here, she does remind me of Lucy in some ways. Like she specifically has a thing where she talks about how every time a practitioner gets a domain, they're like seeding, or the others are seeding ground, which is we had a whole chapter dedicated to making that like a Lucy term, like this concept of her seeding ground was something she didn't want to do. And obviously, like Lucy has kind of vibed with Rook's whole thing since the email where she was first introduced. So it's going to be so interesting to see how these two keep interacting going forward, because I feel like Rook is exactly everything Lucy has spent Arc 9 trying to turn away from. Like Lucy took that battle to Bristow and Alexander, and they both died. And she was sort of like, they needed to be fought, but she didn't like the consequences. Whereas Rook feels like somebody who is still in the war and is like seeking those consequences. So, like, I feel like Rook is going to sort of ultimately be like Lucy's antagonist.
Interesting.
Things heat up.
Interesting
there's so
theory.
much.
Yeah.
There's so much to tie them together, but they have that one crucial difference, which is Lucy's trying to get away from the violence, and I think Rook is going to embrace it.
Yeah. Again, Rook is a character that has like intentionally kept themselves out of the spotlight, right? So
yeah,
it's hard to know. It's hard to know how it will shake out when Rook is involved.
Yeah, but she's just like she feels like an extremist who's trying to like recruit people like Composite Kid and even Tashlit to an extent. Like
for sure.
She's got that charismatic kind of extremist vibe to her, like some other villains from stuff I shouldn't talk about because I don't want to spoil it. But it's my favorite type of villain. It's very fun.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Rook departs as the Kenneteers start to arrive, and Avery preps the trip to the train station ritual path and ritual, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny. Like this last segment of the interlude here really feels like it's throwing us into Arc 10 now. Like I have just been assuming this is the end of Arc 9. I suppose
I think that's fair. Yeah.
But it's like we sort of wrapped up a lot of Arc 9 in that dream sequence, kind of thematically, and it's really been pushing. Like obviously, we set up Crooked Rook here. I'd be very surprised if she's not a big player in Arc 10 after that scene we just did, and then he's obviously the other. What feels like very explicit tie to Arc 10, which is okay. Now we're actually going to the path for the. So like Arc 10 is just going to open with this familiar ritual, which is insane. I can't wait.
Yeah. Then there's this beat where Tash reaffirms her the fact that she's on Team Kenneteer, which is nice. When she thinks to herself, "Oh, I'll tell Verona when we get there what Rook said," which is great. But then she gets immediately distracted by the path, and we never actually see that play out. I don't know. Hopefully, we will soon, because I hate having stuff like that dangling.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to happen, but like it's just so reassuring because we do have this moment where Crooked Rook pulls some real bullshit where she's like,
Yeah,
"I'm not going to threaten you not to say anything, but if you do, it'll drastically change how I interact with you in the future." And it's like, I'm sorry, that's a fucking threat. Like
yeah,
that's um. So yeah, it was so nice to go from there, and when we had that moment where Verona kept Tashlit at an arm's distance with the glamour stuff earlier, I was sort of like, oh, is the trust not there? So to hear Tashlit just in her mind go, I'm going to tell them I'm on these kids' side. I was like, fuck yes.
yeah. It's good, isn't it? It's
I think we said earlier in the arc, if we found out Tashlit wasn't on Team Kenneteer, I was going to die.
Yeah, it's nice to get it as close to confirmed as it's possible to really be, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so then we get an interesting character introduced, a young girl with a animal mask who shows up and then immediately throws herself off the edge of the train station. But we'll see them again because they're 100% a possible Kenneteer.
Because they've got an animal mask.
Because they've got an animal mask.
Yeah, sure. This is about to turn into a time travel story, and that was actually future Verona when she's upgraded to a tiger.
Yeah, when she evolves from cat to tiger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is one of those things. When we get to arc 17 and the time travel's really taken over the story, we'll see this scene from 17-year-old Verona's perspective.
Yeah, can't wait.
But yeah, I mean, the whole setting for this path is just as bonkers as you kind of hoped for, right? Like, it's just
yes, it's so there's so much stuff going on, you can't keep track of it all.
It doesn't seem like they've activated the part of the path that can hurt you though.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Because they're all just chilling, and like some of the others are just watching them. Like so many of these lost others seem so chill. I can't wait to see them interact with like. Well, yeah, I guess they need to start actually trying to walk the path, and that's when the aggressive others come into it. And it's like I could just see Jude's family being a bit all practitionery about it, and like being shit to these others, whereas Avery's going to be like, "Hey, these guys were just at my wedding." Like,
yeah.
Which I should say, I keep just calling it a wedding, which I know, like, I think the Familiar book was like, it's a comparison, but don't lean on it too much.
Which is exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, well, especially because it's a bit weird because, obviously we're talking about like a 13-year-old girl and her 13-ish-year-old in opossum years friend.
Yes.
So, like, obviously leaning into wedding stuff too much could be a bit weird, but also they're dressed a bit like a bride and groom. Like Avery is sort of in a bit more of a traditional like groom's outfit. Snowdrop's in a white dress. Like they're leaning into it a little bit.
Yeah.
So
it's hard for us not to as well, right?
Yeah. So and I find it fun. So I'm probably gonna keep doing it. But like obviously this is not a wedding. It is different. It's just funny to compare it to it.
Yeah. But effectively, we just set up that there's a bunch of, everybody's here to help out. We're going to get this ritual, and we're going to get some cool interactions between all these practitioners.
Yeah, because that's the other thing is the whole gang is here from the practitioner side of things, and they're not just here for the wedding. They're here because Avery is going to get that help that she wants. This is sort of a bit of a climax to her arc in arc 9. It's like for a second I'm like, oh, it feels bad that they have to do this behind the others' backs, but it's like I don't think the others of Kennet left them a choice.
Yeah.
And I trust these three to make good deals with these other practitioners, and I trust most of these other practitioners. Estrella didn't show up, so I can say that more confidently. So yeah, like this was very exciting to me. It's not just to see all these people again, because I just like to point out Jess is back, and so far no one has asked Jessica how her journey went, or is going. So I'm not just excited to catch up with all these characters again, but it was just such a nice moment for Avery to be like, I'm getting that help. Like the Kennet others are shooting themselves in the foot, and I'm not going to let them. Yeah. And then this sort of ends with, like the chapter ends in this great way with like Tashlit being like, holy shit, Rook might have underestimated them. They're making moves where the Kennet others can't see. It's just like, yeah, perfect.
It's a good setup, a good way to kind of set up that these Kenneteers are not just they're not unpowerful. They need to be considered in the scope of these schemes, right? As is kind of evidenced by the fact they stole the furs, but
yeah. Well, again, like it's very unclear who even knows that that's happened, let alone nobody seems to know it was them. But yeah, I mean, yeah, like this goes right back to what Rook's antithesis Miss said in 5.d, where she was sort of like, I picked you guys because I thought everyone would underestimate you, and it looks like that's exactly what's fucking happening. Miss pulling it in from day one.
Yeah. Miss has been the brains behind this entire unraveling narrative, and I'm excited for her to come back in and reveal, yes, I intended for all this to happen, and it worked just as I planned.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's the end of the chapter, right? Nothing else worth talking about?
I don't think so. No, I'm excited to see the familiar ritual. I'm excited all these practitioner characters are back, and we might get to see even more of them as Avery brings them in. Arc 10 is shaping up to be very fun.
But before Arc 10, we have 9.Z, extra material, magic item identification. So rather than actually ask anyone for real help, Verona instead gets Nico to teach her some things about how to identify magical items while the familiar ritual is being set up.
Yeah, she also does this rather than actually help set up the familiar
Yeah,
ritual.
I know, right?
But yeah, no, I mean, worth it because this extra material is great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fun premise, isn't it? It's effectively a lesson on how to identify what your items are about, which is fun world building, but also gives us information on what the specific items that the trio have picked up recently are all about, which is obviously doing double duty there in a very fun way.
Yeah, it's that classic Wildbow thing where he's not just content to just leave it at world building or something. He also needs to do something with it, and that is give us more information on these gifts. I really like the process of all this. Like it actually, as I was reading it, I was having flashbacks to it was like high school chemistry here in Australia, where like one of the units you do is you learn all these processes for identifying what chemicals are. And then like all the tests we were just given like a random substance and you have to run these tests and see how it, reacts to other chemicals, reacts to flame and all that. And like you use that to sort of follow these rules and these flowcharts to figure out what it is. And that this is the magical version of that. And I really felt that similarity. It was really fun.
Yeah, it's a fun kind of process that they go through, isn't it? It's good stuff.
Yeah, especially because I love Wildbow's idea of not just like you don't lean into one system hard because all of them are a bit prone to errors. You try to like drown it in different methods of identification so you can sort of get this whole more holistic picture. Is so cool.
Yeah, it is.
That said, a lot of the early parts of this is built off Nicolette using blood from virgins and blood from killed criminals. It's just like, can we chill? We need to have an intervention.
Yeah. Can we chill out a bit here, Nico?
Enough's enough.
Yeah.
You've been addicted to using people's blood for too long.
She really loves it. She's a fiend for blood. Yeah.
Another interesting thing this extra material does actually is it breaks up the formula that we've kind of established with these notes based extra materials by also including like dialogue. And it's not just because one of the emails also started to include dialogue, but it didn't label who was talking. Whereas this one, it's basically just full on like bits of a chapter.
Yeah, for sure. It feels like there's little bits of chapters stuck in between.
And these were really great as well, just because these were the ways of adding a lot of that really lighthearted banter, just like we saw in 9.z, except now it's obviously between the Kenneteers and the other practitioners rather than the others. But it's like, you've got Liberty juggling goblins and, sort of Nico freaking out because somebody wants to put snot on her very balanced scales. So it was it's this really cool way of like letting us have all that stupid fun stuff that's like the 9.z vibe, but kind of marking it as separate from the notes, which are very much the sort of lore building side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that it really adds is it. Without that, it would be, Nicolette giving some hints and stuff, and Verona taking notes. But you wouldn't really get the vibe of all these practitioners, this group of practitioners that are all there to help the trio, which feels like it's very important to set up for the kind of vibe of what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like it establishing that part that is in the text of just this great vibe that everyone has here. Like even Fernanda's helping. You're right. That is so important for continuing the message of 9.Z and sending us into Arc 10 with a very good sense of like, oh, these guys are all here and on side.
Yeah.
Now, I want to pull out something else I've noticed here.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, Ruben's looking at the size of this paragraph in the notes.
It's a big one.
So we get introduced to these 5 big forces of incarnates, which are like the edge, which is like knives and stuff, and violence, like the hours, which is like time, threads, fate, the bow, I think is how that's pronounced. It's like the branch, like living nature, and then pale, obviously, which is like death. And when you first see these 5 things, I was like, oh, that's from the awakening ritual, right? Like the awakening ritual had the 5 pillars of human experience.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, these would be the same thing, but they're not. There's actually four of them are the same, but when the Kenneteers did the awakening ritual, they didn't have anything that represented nature. They had something that was like, well, they used a coin. They had that coin that's come up again. Like there was nothing directly connecting them to nature in that way. You could argue the way they interacted with the others was maybe that, but then it would be the 6 pillars of human experience. And this got really weird because I was like, oh, maybe they are different things, just with 4 of them overlapping or something, or like something went wrong. But then I went and rechecked the Mile End ritual that we talked about, 6 months ago now or whatever. And in Mile End, they didn't have a coin in their awakening ritual; they had a branch. So either the coin represents nature, which does not feel right
Definitely
to
not
me.
right. I mean, the coin, we've kind of touched on the coin representing the fur trade and the Carmine murder through that, right?
Yeah, like if we're talking about 5 pillars of human experience, then the coin would be like trade or exchange or something.
Maybe
So
collaboration. I don't know.
yeah, but so this is so interesting to me because maybe yeah, like I guess Matthew called them the 5 pillars of human experience. But like, this feels like one of those things where I feel like I found a clue, but I have no idea what to do with it. And I'm just going. I feel like I'm going crazy. Like this feels like proper tinfoiling, but I'm like, why would the Kennet others not give them the piece that's connecting them to nature, but instead connecting them to what I would assume is a bit of an like representation of capitalism and like all the worst parts of the practice that they probably want to hamper down on. I don't know. Yeah, this is weird. So I don't know what to do with this information yet because I came across it sort of right at the end of typing the notes, and I don't know where this is going, but it feels interesting to me that we have these 5 incarnate things that are almost exactly the same as the 5 pillars of the human experience, but the Kenneteers had money instead of nature.
Yeah, I don't know. You're right. It's interesting. It definitely is something.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm going insane. Hopefully, I'll have something by next week, or somebody else will have written in something that makes sense of this. The other point we need to talk about is obviously the one for death is called like the Pale, which is obviously that's the name of the story. So that's going to be a thing, right? I don't know, I suppose it's a murder mystery. Like it makes sense, but still.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see. We'll see if there's more to it than that, I guess.
Sorry, a lot of this stuff is just me being like, "Hey, see, there's a thing. I don't know about it, but there's a
Yeah,
thing."
yeah. So yeah, they also use one of these techniques to assess the gifts that were given by the Kennet others, which is interesting. We get a bit of a breakdown of potentially where the Kennet others stand in relation to the Kenneteers.
Yeah, well, they do some really detailed readings as well early on the shit they picked up from the transients. Um, and so okay, this knife is apparently not total garbage. Um, like the knife that Avery has, it like stays sharp or potentially even gets sharper the more you use it, which I suppose for like a knife that you're using as a tool is actually pretty handy because sweat activates it and counts. So as long as you're sweating over it, um, it'll keep cutting things better and better. So that actually does kind of seem somewhat useful. I will begrudgingly admit. So I've been copying flack for making fun of this knife last week. So
no, it's trash.
It's not 0 out of 10. It's like a solid. Actually, they call it 4 out of 10, right? That seems a bit high. I don't know. I'm sure I'll get proven wrong. I'm sure it'll be like clutch for something.
Yeah, it's going to save the day when they have to use it to cut some wet piece of rope or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, Cherry Pop saved the day that one time, so that doesn't mean it's not a 1 out of 10 item.
Yeah, true. How dare you imply Cherry Pop is a 1 out of 10? By the way,
Cherry Pop's a 10 out of 10
yeah, she's
character,
perfect.
but she's a 1 out of 10 tool. She 1 out of 10 might be high. But yeah.
So the breakdown of this is effectively Miss and Guillemay's gifts seem positive. John and Toad are neutral, while Gash and Marissa are negative, which seems to track. Indicates Gashwad is almost certainly not in a great spot, right?
Well, they do say that the thorn,
yeah, true,
might be affecting that way of its nature.
Yeah,
like because these positive tilts or whatever don't just signify like the vibe of when it was given. So I'm like Gash seems ambiguous at best. But Barisica's is explicitly sort of called out where they're like, oh, maybe it's just because it's dark glamour, and Fernanda's like, nah, no, that's not it. And poor Verona is like, what could this mean? And it's like she's a baddie, you nincompoop. I don't know. It feels like Marisica's probably on the baddie side, right? Like, especially with stuff like this.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to imagine that that's not the case.
Like, ever since we had the coin revelation in Arc 3, it's been like Edith and Marisica and the Hungry Choir have been drawn together since then. So, yeah, like, until proven otherwise, I'm just assuming Marisica is guilty because by association of the coin.
Yeah.
I mean, the other interesting ones, it's nice to know that Gilly is somewhat positive. That is just nice. John being neutral is sad, but makes sense.
Yep.
And then the one from Toadswallow and Cherry Pop starts as positive and then sinks on negative, which I'm going to view as this early part being because Toadswallow gave it to Cherry to give to them. So it's kind of like the Toadswallow part was him helping, and then the Cherry part is just, she has no motives for anything. So she swung it back down to neutral.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
Sorry, and there's also a bit where they go into detail. They do a detailed reading on this rose that Verona got from Guillemay. We haven't heard of this before, right? Like, at first I just thought this was my terrible memory.
Yeah, I had that same thought too. But I think you're right, yeah.
Like, my memory is bad, but, like, I went back and looked, and, like, I couldn't find any reference on it. It's not in either of the other extra materials on the gifts received. I don't remember Verona mentioning having gotten it before, so I don't know. Maybe it's I can't decide if it's a late edition or whether we need to tinfoil about this. But it is an interesting setup for as Verona's going away. She's presumably taking this rose with her as a source of glamour, and we're already seeding these ideas of like you need to be careful about how much you're using because the more you use, the slower it grows back. So it's like, Verona's going to have to self-regulate. She can't get too addicted to the glamour. So thanks, Guillemay. I'm excited to see this rose in action while Verona's away because it seems like it's being set up for, Verona having to regulate herself, or it's also set up that you can do one big climactic, like go all out just this once to sort of use it all up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know. You're right. The fact that we didn't see it being given, or I don't remember seeing it being given at least, gives it an interesting vibe where I'm not sure. I don't know. Like it'll feel weird when it's used, just like inherently because we don't have all of the context for it. And I guess maybe that's what this extra materials is trying to amend. We will have to see.
Yeah. But I really like the way this extra material ends as well because it's a really cool way of like So this ends with like Timon being like, "Okay, we're ready. We're about to get started," and then the cliffhanger ending is sort of, "Okay, we're about to start the familiar ritual."
Mm.
And what I really like about that is this is actually just basically the same cliffhanger that Arc 9 or 9.z ended on as well. Like we basically had the same cliffhanger done twice, but I really felt it both times because this extra material had a really nice in-universe explanation for why it was still happening in between. So it's sort of like we end 9.z on like, okay, we're on the path, we're gonna do this familiar ritual, and then this whole extra material gets to be like, okay, we're just prepping, it's fine, have these character interactions, and it's like, okay, and now we're about to start it. And like I love that I can get hit by the same cliffhanger twice in a row and it feels good.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's still, we're still on the hook for it, and I'm kind of enjoying it. You know,
Yeah.
that's how excited we are for the familiar ritual, I suppose.
What sounds like Arc 10 is just going to open on it
Arc
happening
10 is just going to be the familiar
immediately.
ritual. It's going to be a long, long ritual.
Oh, yeah. No, well, I mean, it's definitely going to be like, from the very beginning. I wouldn't be surprised if, like, part of the ritual is literally the first words of 10.1
Yeah, I think so too.
or 10.a, Snowdrop interlude to start.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's where the chapter ends, huh?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What an arc.
What an
Like,
arc.
again, we are just blatantly assuming that it's the start of Arc 10 tomorrow. But yeah. Whew.
Yeah. But that's not the end of the show yet, because we still got to dive into some Pale predictions, Elliot.
Yeah.
Predictions
So
left
what?
by our community in our Pale Predictor form, which you can find the link to in the show notes down below.
What have you brought this week, Ruben? Because
I've
yours,
brought a
yeah.
prediction. Usually we bring predictions that we think are going to come true. I brought a prediction that is so outlandish, I just want to make sure that if it does somehow manage to come true, the person who has predicted it manages to get credit. But until then, we can all just enjoy it for the sheer shenanigans that it brings. This is from...
I yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that Kibos, who sent this in, she had only just read 6.3 when she submitted this earlier in the week. She's actually currently catching up.
So can you tell us what happens in 6.3? Set us the stage.
I mean, that's just like they're just still kind of at the BHI and all the shenanigans are going on, and that's like I think Kibos had just read it was like the implement. She's been doing a bit of a live read on the Doof Discord. And some of you might remember Kibos. She was in that Arc 3 reflecting episode that we did. But she's fallen behind. She's currently catching up. So yeah, she just hit the implement extra material. So this is early Arc 6, and apparently decided to hit us with this prediction.
Mm.
And Kipos, if you ever catch up and you're still listening to this podcast, I'm sorry, but we have to call this out. It's a hilarious prediction.
It's ridiculous, yeah. So, I mean, it's long too. I won't get into the details, but effectively it boils down to there's not just one secret practitioner in Kennet. There are four. And those four are Grumble, Verona's dad, Aunt Heather, and Jasmine. The dream team, the Kenneteers prime, I guess you could call them, the originals. And it's wild. Kip goes into some specifics, and specifically like ties it up in how their lives have had problems with the kind of fallout from their practicing, right? Grumble his aging and losing his memory. VD obviously being a piece of shit. And then
Yeah.
Aunt Heather and Jasmine, who seem more or less fine, but obviously have some problems. Like
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Jazz is, she's been defined by that massive stain all over her since Lucy got her sight in a way.
So that's kind of a cool thing there. But yeah, I mean, I'm all for secret practitioners theory, but this one is just kind of not going to be true. So I wanted to call it out just so in case it is true, Kip gets the credit that she deserves.
I think Kip might have been intentionally leading into the buck wildness of this theory. I don't think she was fully serious. I'm gonna do her a favor and mention that.
No, she's hardcore on this theory, and everyone should treat that as true. I think
this is like all the wildest secret practitioner bullshit you've come up with rolled into one.
Yeah, Elliot, do you have a prediction that you want to pull out for us?
Yeah, mine is the opposite in that it's very meticulously based on research.
Interesting. Yeah.
So this comes from Snowdrop's Tiny Fan, who that's a relatively new name, but I've seen it popping up a lot recently. Because something Snowdrop's Tiny Fan has been doing is they built like a huge document where they went through like every quote on people's histories in Kennet. So like everything everyone's ever said about like, oh yeah, I came to the town like 10 years ago and blah blah blah. And has been like putting together a really detailed timeline on early Kennet based on all these things and calling out the bits where people's shit doesn't add up. I've actually failed to read the doc because it's so thorough. Every time I get like a few lines in, I'm like, I can already feel my brain melting and I leave. But basically, Snowdrop's Tiny Fan has sort of used this document that they've built to put together this theory that Matthew actually pushed Edith James to commit suicide in order to create the body for the girl by candlelight, in order to save the girl by candlelight from her ephemeral nature. They even go so far as to say Matthew may have created the doom to begin with to haunt Edith and drive her to committing suicide, and he may not have realized that it was going to come back with force when the girl by candlelight took over the body, and he messed up in that way. And there's a link to a Reddit thread. I'll put this in our Reddit thread, but there's like a shitload of evidence Snowdrop's Tiny Fan has put together to sort of talk about all of this. But yeah, basically, the summary is that Matthew got Edith James to kill herself in order to make the vessel for the girl by candlelight.
I like it. I think the fact that we've had some attention paid recently to the fact that it's highly unlikely that Edith James's a body so convenient for the girl by candlelight just was there. So yeah, I think it makes sense. I'm curious how you feel about this theory, given that it probably undercuts your Matthew is a secret prisoner of Edith theory.
It definitely does contradict that.
Not fully. Not. There's a possibility where Matthew, it was more of a partnership and Edith has kind of taken that over, but it's pretty against it, I would say.
I think, I look, if you had to ask me to pick between my tinfoil that I haven't researched but I like and Snowdrop's Tiny Fan's very well researched theory, I'd probably begrudgingly have to pick STFs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do really like this as an idea because this idea, it would sort of establish much more of a history of Matthew in particular, but also Edith being willing to cross lines to protect themselves, which would be quite suitable for villains in this story. That's been all about teamwork. Like the idea that Edith was killed in order to, serve the girl by candlelight is shitty. So yeah, I guess we'll see. I don't know. Also, yeah, that Reddit thread that I'll be linking to in our Reddit thread, also has a link to Snowdrop's Tiny Fan, their doc.
Yes,
it's very thorough, worth checking out.
Yeah, definitely worth checking it out. Now, before we wrap up, Elliot, it's time for a new discussion question.
So our discussion question for the next fortnight is, what do you think the next steps are for Verona's home life? So we'll run this over 2 weeks, and so you've got the next 2 episodes to get your answers in, and then we'll hit you with another discussion question after that.
Yeah, but I'm interested to hear what people think could happen next, will happen next, given that we had some theories about what Jazz / Avery / Lucy / anybody could have done to kind of avoid this situation or build up now that it's kind of happened. I'm interested to hear some more thoughts around that line of what's going to happen next for Verona? Are we just going to get to the point where she's not a part of this story anymore? I mean, that seems impossible, right?
Yeah, that would be wild.
So yeah.
But yeah, no, because obviously, like, when we say next steps, we mean after this 2 to 3 week vacation with her mom.
Yeah.
I will not be reading out answers that just say she's about to go on a vacation with her mom.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe if you have something interesting that you think could happen during this vacation that would
of course.
Add to it, sure.
You can bring it up, but like, just like, I'm interested to hear what people think, could, would, should happen after this vacation and based on what happens during it. Like, where can you see her going?
Yeah.
Because I think it's been made clear to us that going back to her dad is not an option. And I'm skeptical that staying with her mom is an option. So what do you think are the options?
Yeah. So yeah, if you have answers to that discussion question, you can leave them in our discussion thread, which we linked down in the show notes down below. Also, if you're enjoying the show, why not leave us a review on your podcatcher of choice? Because that's a great way to get more people into the show and possibly even into Wildbow's works.
Yes, we're also on Twitter just search Power Reflections. Yeah, that's where the live reads happen. That's where we announce our own episodes. And if you were following us there, you would already know about the latest show to hit the Wildbow fandom, which is Pale in Comparison, which is a new Otherverse podcast that I'm already addicted to, where Jenny and Malia are working their way through Pact, having read or continuing to be up to date in Pale.
Yes.
So Jenny has read Pact before, and Malia has only read Pale. So they're sort of going through, and we're sort of getting to see how somebody who's only read Pale approaches Pact, and I'm already having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. I mean, we've
great.
talked about wanting to see more of people who just know Pale getting into Pact and having a reaction, and so I'm really excited to get into this. Not in the least because I think the thing that makes their podcast so engaging to listen to is the dynamic that they have as two sisters, real life sisters. They clearly have such a fun dynamic between the two of them already, which makes for such an engaging listen. So I'm partway through the first episode of that, and I encourage everyone to go and check it out.
Oh, wait till you get to the end.
No spoilers.
Sorry, we can't talk about that here.
That's for our other podcast that's coming soon. It's called Pale in Comparison, where we dive into their show and review it on an episode by episode basis.
We'll never be free of Otherverse content. We'll just keep inventing.
It's an infinite rabbit hole, yeah.
But yeah, no. So definitely go check out Pale in Comparison, especially if you're someone who hasn't read Pact. Start reading Pact and read it alongside their podcast.
Yes.
You could be with Malia, because when I did Deep in Pact, we had like 2 or 3 people who were reading Pact alongside me, and that was honestly huge. As the one person who's playing on a different level of field to everyone else, it's really nice to have those few people who are like at the same stage as you.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, if you have the bandwidth to start Pact up, do it and join Malia. Like it'll probably be appreciated.
Yeah, or worst case, good prompt for a Pact reread, huh? Why not?
Yeah, exactly. But that was the problem with Pact, is everyone kept running ahead. I did have more people early on who were reading alongside me, and then everybody just started binging arcs at a time.
Yeah. It's a compelling book, How are we meant to stop after just one chapter?
Yeah, exactly.
But yes, so yeah, you can check that out, Pale in Comparison, in any good podcatcher. Or if you want to head over to doofmedia.com, you can see some more of the great shows on the Doof Media Network. I know the Doofcast episode on the Snyder cut of Justice League has just come out. And I think there's actually a thing on the website now where people can call up and leave their thoughts about the Snyder cut that will presumably get into a future episode as well, if you have thoughts about what's going on, how it was.
That post is called the Peter cut, I believe, named after Peter Enigma, the user who has long stood by Zack Snyder's cut and has apparently been rewarded.
Has kind of been validated, vindicated a bit. But yeah, you can find all that on doofmedia.com. Or if you want to support all the shows on the Doof Media Network, you can go to patreon.com/doofmedia and become a patron. There are all kinds of exclusive things you get access to, bonus shows. We do every week. There's a new bonus episode of some of our bonus shows, including one that Elliot and I do called The High Ground, where we watch movies. I would describe it as movies that have a different critical and audience reception score on Rotten Tomatoes. Maybe is the best way to sum it up.
Yeah, honestly, it started as a Star Wars thing, and we've branched out from there, and now it's very hard to describe the show. We need to tighten that in a bit. I don't
think we do. I think it fits with the vibe of this very fun show that we never really establish our premise very strongly.
Sorry, I'm not talking about changing the show. I'm talking about changing how we talk about it so that we actually have a way of describing it.
But it's very fun. It's the two of us and Elliot's sister, Georgia. So a great time. Again, family dynamics make for very fun podcasts, in my opinion. So check it out. There's all kinds of bonus stuff on there. And while you're on Patreon, you can also go to patreon.com/Wildbow and support Wildbow, who's, of course, the creator of the Otherverse setting and all the great things that happen within it. So head on over to his Patreon as well.
Yeah. And with that, we'll see you all next week, we'll be hitting you with our Arc 9 retrospective, I bet.
Well, see, unless we get, 9.13 and 9.w next week, we will see.
Well, no, because this was a 9.z, so it'd have to be like 9.zz.
9.AA, and it's all about batteries.